everyone, I am Miss Nuria again, and I am back here for another unit, another book, and another focus on our reading and our storytelling. So this unit, we're gonna put everything we've learned together, and we're gonna tell a new story. Yes? So, what we're gonna be doing is, on this video, I am going to read the story. Next video, we're gonna analyze the plot and the story and what it is about. The next one, we're gonna talk about the characters and where the story takes place. And then we're gonna learn how to put all those elements together and retell the story on the last video. So yay, I am very excited. So our new book is called Mrs. Katz and Tush, and it's written by Patricia Polacco. Now, let's look at the cover. What do we see? We see an older lady with a little boy, and they look very different, don't they? But they have one little thing in common, and it's that little cat. So let's read that story. Larnell didn't know Mrs. Katz very well, but almost every other day his mother stopped in to see her after work. Since her husband died, she's so alone, his mother had told him. Mrs. Katz held tight to his mother's hand the day they looked at the photo album. "That's my husband, Miriam," said Mrs. Katz. "He came from Poland like me, a long, long time ago. We had such a life. Such a life." Then her voice broke. "We had no children, and I'll be all alone for Hanukkah and Passover." Then she cried. Here that it says her voice broke means when you're talking and you start crying. The next day, Larnell stopped in to see her himself. "I've been thinking," he said. "A cat had some kittens in the basement of our building. We found someone to take care of all, except for this little one. She's the runt. Nobody wants her because she's so ugly. She doesn't even have a tail." "Ugly, you say?" said Mrs. Katz. "My Myron was ugly too when he was little, but he grew up to be such a person." Mrs. Katz looked at the kitten. "Scrawny little bubble. So small, no tail," she said as she examined the kitten closely. "I don't know," she said doubtfully. Then she saw the look on Larnell's face. "Larnell, I'll take her, but only if you'll come and help me with her. I've never had a cat before." Larnell promised. "A good Yiddish name I'll give her," said Mrs. Katz. "Let's see. She has no tail. All you see is her tush. That's it. We'll call her Tush." Little Tush grew healthy and strong. Mrs. Katz cooked for her, brushed her, knitted toys for her, and even read to her. "Such a person," she'd say as she watched Tush play. Mrs. Katz was in love. Larnell kept his promise. He visited Mrs. Katz and Tush every day after school. There was always a fresh-baked kugel, a tall glass of milk waiting for him. But as much as he grew to love Tush, he loved listening to Mrs. Katz talk about the old country and the way times used to be. I come from Warsaw. That's in Poland, you know. I come here to work sewing dresses in the garment district with my cousin Moishe. I didn't speak a word of English." "Then how did you talk to people?" asked Larnell. "I didn't," she answered. "A lot I cried in those days. Until I met my Myron. He asked me to marry him after he tasted my kugel." "I believe that," Larnell said as he ate some. "Myron and I used to vacation in the Catskills. A borscht resort, you know. A place for Jews to stay. You mean Jews couldn't stay anywhere they didn't want to? Asked Larnell. Mrs. Katz didn't answer. Instead, she went to the trunk and pulled out some old clothes. My grandma told me about places you couldn't stay either, Larnell said softly. Larnell, your people and mine are alike, you know. Trouble we've seen, happiness too, great strength we've had. You and I are alike, so much alike. Now, where was I? Oh, yes, the Catskills. We used to dress every Sunday and have a costume ball, said Mrs. Katz. Then she put on a record on the record player. It was old and scratched. You hear that, Larnell? She said. That is what we used to dance to. It's a dance from my homeland, and I'll show you. They whirled around and laughed and giggled. Look at them go. As weeks passed, Larnell spent more and more time with Mrs. Katz. Since you're almost family to me, Larnell, she said one day, I want you should come with me, say Kaddish for my Myron. I know you're not Jewish, but my Myron would have liked you. You're such a person, Larnell. Cemetery, she read from her book. Then she asked Larnell to put a small rock on top of Mr. Katz's headstone. We do this to remember, she said softly. Shalom, my Myron, she murmured, and wiped the tears from her face. On the way home, she announced, Kugel! Such a kugel I baked for you, Larnell! Hurry! Hurry! Tush will be worried for us, she said as they walked. When they got home, they called for Tush, but she didn't come. They looked everywhere for her. Suddenly, look at that! Mrs. Katz gasped. The window of the fire escape was open! Oh no, she cried. I forgot to shut the window before I left. Poor Bubble. She has never been outside. We'll find her. Larnell tried to reassure her. She has been acting strange lately, Mrs. Katz said through her tears. She's been trying to get out, but I was afraid that she would get hit by a car. I'll find her, Mrs. Katz, Larnell said. I won't let you down. It was getting dark. First, Mrs. Katz and Larnell looked around their building. Then they went everywhere in the neighborhood. They left notes on the doors, telephone poles, and fences. They asked everyone who lived nearby, but no one had seen little Tush. The night it stormed. There was rain, awful, awful rain. Mrs. Katz hardly slept as she thought about her little Katly. She's such a person, she whispered. Larnell worried most of the night too. What will Mrs. Katz do, he thought. Please, God, bring the little cat back to her, he said softly into his pillow. A knock on the front door awoke Mrs. Katz. It was Larnell's father and two neighbors. Is this yours? They asked. My bubble little Katle, Mrs. Katz exclaimed. We found her in the back alley, soaking wet and hungry, Mr. Moore said. Thank you, she said as she took Tush in her arms. After a while, Tush no longer had a desire to go outside, but she slept a lot, even when Larnell came over to play with her. It was at my Aunt Havla's Passover Seder that I met my Myron. Did you know that? Mrs. Katz asked as she looked at Larnell. What good times they were, with lots and lots of family. Now it's just me, she said softly. Could I have Passover dinner with you? Asked Larnell. I thought you'd never ask, she explained as she hugged him close. Such a Seder I'll prepare for you. Passover is a good time for food, Mrs. Katz shouted as they edged their way through the crowd in the deli. Like your people, my people were slaves too. They lived in a country where they didn't want to be. They wanted freedom so much that they prayed God to help them. So he sent an angel that brought death and sadness to the houses of our captors. But the angel did not visit the houses of our people. How did the angel know where the Jewish lived? Larnell asked. They marked the doors. Then the angel passed over. Passed over, Larnell. That's why we call it the celebration of Passover. So in Larnell, we have a big feast to celebrate, but also remember those who had to suffer so we could be free, said Mrs. Katz. Part of dinner is sad and part is happy. As Larnell helped get out the linens and china, Mrs. Katz said, You see this tablecloth? This was our wedding chuppah, or canopy. For all these years we have used it for holy days and celebrations. How come you have so many dishes? Larnell asked. Because some Jews don't eat dairy and meat off the same dishes, she answered. When they sat down to settle together, Mrs. Katz lit 2 candles and waved her hands over them. She read her book, said prayers, smiled and said, Let the feast begin. They drank red wine and water and ate bitter herbs, lamb and chicken. They also had gefilte fish and spicy chopped apples and potato pancakes. This bread looks like soda cracker, Larnell exclaimed. We call it matzo, dear. We eat it at Passover. It's flat because there is no yeast, so it doesn't rise. Larnell, I have hidden a piece of matzo around the apartment. If you can find it, I have a surprise for you. The surprise was a hand-knit sweater that she had made for him. The next day, Mrs. Katz yelled out her back window to Larnell's apartment. Come quickly already! Something wonderful! Larnell and his mom and dad rushed to the door. The angel of death passed over, but the angel of life didn't. Mazel tov, Tush! 4 babies! At last, I'm a bubble. As the years passed, Mrs. Katz, Tush, and her descendants became part of Larnell's family. There were graduations, weddings, new babies, and finally a Kaddish, or how we call it, a funeral. Larnell stood in front of the headstone. He read from her book, and he placed a small rock on top of her headstone. Then he, his wife, their children, read the inscription together. Mrs. Katz, our booby. Such a person. The end. Okay, everyone, so that was our story. I'll just rush so that we have time, and I'll tell you that we will be talking about it next time. So, bye.